Hey everybody, Dave here. Hope you're having an awesome day. So I just got back from Collecticon. It's a really fun toy show in Chicago, and my time is a little bit short. Oh, I did do a recap of the Collecticon on my Toy Rats channel, so if you want to check that out, I'll leave a link below. But I try and do a build every other week, and because of being away last week, my time is a little bit short, so I thought I need to come up with a little bit simpler build. And I remembered one of my viewers was like, hey, why don't you do the 1952 Bugs Bunny Hare Lift robot? And I grew up on Warner Brother cartoons. I mean, Bugs Bunny, Wile E. Coyote, I mean, just the best. So I was looking at this, I thought this actually could be really fun and maybe not super complicated. So yeah, let's give it a shot. Alright, so for this project, I got a piece of scrap wood from my garage. I'm going to do some sanding on this because I want it to be really smooth when I paint it, but I'm really nervous about this grain. So I'm using this Bondo glaze, and I'm just going to fill the whole thing, and then I'll sand that down, and hopefully the Bondo glaze will help fill all those cracks. So I'll let this dry, and while this is drying, I'm going to try and figure out the hip system. I've got these little plastic beads and these little wooden dowels, and the bot itself is essentially just these little stick pegs. So I'm kind of carefully drilling into these beads. I've got some smaller black beads that I'll be using for the elbow joints because they are a little bit smaller. And this is dry now, so I'm going to go ahead and sand this up. And I'm using a 1200 grit here, and it got really smooth. So this should paint really nice. Now I got to make some holes for the, I guess essentially the waist, then the hip will attach to that. So just finding the halfway point there. I'm doing a small kind of starter hole, and then I'm going to take this to my drill press in my garage and drill out that hole. Once that hole's drilled, the little waist piece fits in really nice. Now I did print out the robot itself so I could kind of figure out how tall and how long to make all the legs and the components. This actually worked out pretty nice. I will do a little bit of adjustment later, but I'll show you that in a second. Using my little miter box here to cut, sanding all these little pieces down. And I'm going to go ahead and start assembling this. I just kind of want to look at it really quick and see like where the bead goes. Now as I'm doing this, I'm looking at this thinking, man, these beads are almost a little too small. Like the white bead would actually work in the middle, but I need some bigger hips. So unfortunately, I've already drilled all my holes, so I'm going to have to redo all this again, but I need to go find some new beads. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to make the foot using my little chop saw that my dad got me for my birthday. And I couldn't quite get all of this girth off with the chop saw, so I thought I'll just cut it by hand, and good night. That chop saw is way nicer than cutting this by hand. I was getting hand cramps. I put a glove on just because I couldn't get a grip on it, but after persistence, I got it cut off. I'm going to take this to my belt sander again in my garage, and I'm going to kind of grind all this down. There it is, kind of ground down, but it's a little rough still, so I'm going to get some sandpaper and clean this all up. And that looks great. I got both feet, and I think they match pretty nice. Okay, now I'm going to mark some little holes for the legs to go into the feet, and I'm going to drill all the way through the base. That way I have the support of the base and the foot to hold up the weight of this very fragile, should I say, robot. So I marked some holes with a pencil, drilled them again on my drill press so everything's nice and straight, clean. I'm kind of just dry fitting this to see how it's going to work. I will actually end up just sliding the legs up and down to kind of find the height, and I'll just cut it off from the bottom. I have these little washer things. I got them at a yard sale a long time ago, but they look perfect for the knee joints. So I'm going to carefully take my X-Acto blade. My ream tool was a little too big for this, so I had to use a blade. Drilled that out, and I just barely had enough space to squeeze this wooden dowel in, but I think that's going to work perfect. Just doing some measurements there, and here's an example of I'm kind of lining it up. I'll do a little mark there, I'll snip that off so I got the height of the leg. So here's where I'm kind of looking at this thinking, it feels too tall. And in animation, you got squash and stretch, so some shots he was stretched really tall and some it was cut down a little bit more. So I feel like this cut down piece is going to work out a little bit nicer with the scale of all these greeblies. I'm going to sand these down just so it has a little bit lower profile, and that'll work pretty nice. And then I got to make a light bulb. So I've got this bead, and I've got a sucker stick, and I thought, well, if I glue the bead onto the end of the sucker stick, and then take a little bit of that glazing putty that I was using earlier, and just kind of taper it, it may actually work. Now, it wasn't pretty at first, but I went ahead and did a bunch of sanding, and I primed it gray. I got a couple little gaps there, so I did the whole process again, and in the end, it turned out pretty cool. Okay, to make the claws, I'm going to cut these out of polystyrene. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of tracing the shape here, and then I'm transferring that onto my polystyrene. And the cool thing about polystyrene is if you just score it with a sharp blade, I scored this maybe 2 or 3 times, just carefully following that line. You can actually just kind of snap and break pieces off. Now, it's not always 100% clean. Sometimes you have to do a little bit extra cleanup work, and you'll see here, I have a couple little rough parts that I'll just take an X-Acto blade, carefully trim some of that down, and then I'll get a little bit of sandpaper or the sanding file and just sand that down. Using a little bit of Tamiya thin set, and this actually bonds the polystyrene together, and then I'll do just a little dab of glue and a couple of my little beads for rivets. I love these beads. Now I did finally, the next day, I got some larger wooden balls for the hips, and I'm gonna have to go back through and re-drill all these. So I was like, I'm gonna just do it on my drill press. Now I was holding that thing and that ball was like sliding all around. I thought, oh, this looks awful. Like, it's so crooked. So what I did was I was like, I just need to slow down, and I made little pilot holes first. So I kind of drilled some pilot holes, and then when I put it on the drill press, I was able to just be able to hold on to that, and it had something to go into. So that worked a lot better. And sometimes just slowing down, that was kind of the theme of this project. I had a lot of struggles with this just because I felt like I was in a rush. But here I am kind of dry fitting the hips and the waist there, and I'm liking this a lot better. I'm glad I did switch out the size of those balls because it just feels more substantial. So add a little bit of glue, we'll glue this into place, kind of twisting that around to make sure I got enough glue on there. Put a little glue into that bead. Now I haven't glued the hips or the balls yet because I want to make sure that the legs are in the right position. So I'm going to kind of hang tight on all that stuff, but I wanted to get that hip there. Now the shoulders had these little circles, so I just took a washer, a little bit of glue, and we'll get that on there. That looks great, and that'll be something that the arm can kind of slide into. So put a little bit of glue on the arm. Got that there. Now originally I glued one arm down and one arm up, maybe like a little action pose, but then I thought, just to store this, it might be a pain, so I put both arms down. You'll see that in a minute. Put a little bit of glue on the hips there. Now I got everything lined up where I want it to be, so I can make sure that it's setting straight and kind of how I want it. So here it is, kind of all assembled. There's the arm up. And you'll notice I forgot to do my antenna, and later on, after I paint everything, I remember, and I'm like, it was kind of a pain, but that's for another day. But yeah, I like the arm position there, and it sits nice. I think that'll look nice on my display stand. Now there's these little gauges, so I went ahead and printed this off on my computer. I just made a little gauge in Illustrator, and then I'm going to glue this washer onto there. I painted the washer black first, then glued it on, and then I thought, you know what? If I take this UV resin, just do a little glob in there, it might give a really cool effect. This is probably one of the coolest parts of this entire build for me. When I did it, I was like, that looks really great. So I painted out all those little parts. There's the antenna that I totally forgot about. And then here is the little gauge with the UV resin. That looks awesome. I love it. So I spray painted the whole thing silver, but then I realized the body is actually like this light blue. So I had to go back and just did a light wash of light blue. And then I'm gluing on all my little gauges here. And I'm just using some tweezers. I can pick it up, put a little glob of glue, and then I can use those tweezers to help me kind of align that and drop it back down. So once I got that glued, I'll go ahead and grab the gauge and I'll glue that down. I did use a little bit too much super glue on some of these things, but oh yeah, here's the light bulb. I never did a close-up of the finished piece, but I painted it with a gloss white, and it turned out really cool. Now I was about ready to call this one done, and then merp. Oh well. Okay, this thing was a little booger, for crying out loud. Um, because I was kind of in a rush, this silver paint really should have maybe at least 24 hours to dry. I was only able to give it about 7 hours to dry, and to the touch it was fine, but when I was putting some of these parts on and I was holding it, I put a fingerprint in the back and I couldn't stand it, so I was like, ugh. So I matched it all off and I spray painted that, cleaned it up. That looked great, but as I was doing that, I put a fingerprint on the front, and then I taped this off, and then my tape put marks on it, and then it's a perfectionist in me. I can't stand having a mistake in there, but I just ran out of time, and there's a couple little Mars on this side that I don't love, but yeah, this was supposed to be a simple one. The simple ones, and this is probably the most fragile one I've built. It is really, really fragile. Actually, it holds up okay. It's just with these little sticks and stuff. So this is the kind of thing where it makes it hard to sell this kind of stuff, because if I had to ship this, it'd probably come in like little pieces. So anyways, yeah, this was my simple fun build for this week. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's do some turnaround shots of this thing. And as always, it's a great day to be a toy nerd. Have a great one.